Hello, listeners. Tonight, we dive into history that's so boring it might just put you to sleep. But hidden in the dull dates and dusty events are mysteries, secrets, and stories you've never heard. So, dim the lights, let the world fall away, and prepare yourself to step silently into the past. Maybe grab a blanket and let's explore the weird,
dark, and strangely fascinating side of the pea.
Like the video and subscribe, because only if you truly enjoy this journey
Will you be ready to survey?
But wait, imagine it is the year 1315. There is no sun in the sky. The rain is pouring down, as if someone had forgotten to repair the holes in the sky. The land has turned into a sea of mud and water, rice, wheat, barley, all.
The cakes are ruined. Harvest time is come, but there is nothing to harvest.
This is the beginning of the medieval famine.
In the first few weeks, everyone thinks maybe God is testing us. Prayers increase in the church. Bells ring. The priest shouts, "This is the result of our sins." Some say it is the work of witches or the devil. And the poor peasants think if there is sin, the sins of kings are greater. Why should we suffer the punishment? But politics will not fill your stomach then. The first blow comes to bread. Bread is the staple food of the poor, but there is no wheat. The stocks are exhausted. First, people bring out the old grain worm, moldy and stinking. Still, a hungry stomach doesn't care about the smell. If there are insects, it's extra protein. Some families have started making alternative bread. Dried tree bark is ground into a powder. A mixture of acre, wood dust, and grass is made. And if you're lucky, flour mixed with ashes, kindly given by a rich person. This bread is so hard that it can be used as a tool to break rocks. If you try to bite it with your teeth break. But people say, at least your stomach doesn't break instead of your teeth. When you go to the market, you see strange things. Dried mice are being sold for the price of small fish. Dogs and cats are suddenly disappearing because they have become dinner. Even donkey and horse meat, which even dogs wouldn't eat in normal times, has become a luxury. Meanwhile, the poor farmers are in the worst condition. There are no crops on their own land, and the lords are not exempt from taxes. The lords' granaries are full of grain, but they say this is for the kings, not for you. The result: theft, robbery, rebellion. The children, they cry at first, then fall silent. The hungry children lose the strength to cry. Their bellies swell, bones show, and their eyes grow big, as if they will swallow everything. And amidst this horror, the village atmosphere is filled with rumors. Some say the lords in the north are hoarding grain instead of gold and silver. Others say there is an old witch in the eastern forest, and the crops are dying because of her. People become even more blind in the darkness. When the first death occurs, it is not from disease, but from hunger. An old farmer, after working all day and not getting food, stops breathing at night. The next day, the villagers watch in silence. No one cries.
They just think to you is Merry.
It seems it is Ted is playing an invisible game. Who will live today, and who will go underground tomorrow morning? On a normal day, the farmers of the village would get up early and go to the fields. The rooster crowed, rice was being cooked, and children would be noisy. But in a year of famine, morning means a different curse. You wake up on an empty stomach. You wake up with hunger pains, as if a snake is inside your stomach. Your wife is sitting next to you, an empty pot in her hand. There are black spots at the bottom. The smell of yesterday's burnt flour still lingers. That pot is like today's breakfast. The children are sitting in the corner, their eyes wide. They know there is no food, but they still say, "Mom, where is the bread?" You know, answering only means more crying, so keep quiet. Some families boil grass and eat leaves to satisfy their hunger. When you go to the fields near the village, you can see people picking grass like sheep. Some pull roots from the bushes. Their mouths water even while sweeping the soil. A woman said with a laugh, "It would be good to make soup with these roots." But when everyone ate the soup, they realized the water mixed with soil tasted more like mud than food. Some people got sick after eating it. The kitchen is no longer the fragrant place it used to be. The pots and pans are soaked with the pieces of bread from the previous day. The water is heated and eaten again. It is called soup. Some families kill cats or dogs to make soup, although the church calls it a sin. Religion also submits to hunger. Some even set traps to catch mice. If 3 to 4 mice are found in one night, it is equal to a royal feast. Hunger spreads not only in the stomach, but to every part of the body. People want to go to the field in the morning, but they cannot stand. Their heads are dizzy, their eyes are blurry, their hands are shaking. Even if someone reaches the field, they fall within half an hour. An old man in the village says, "Now I don't go to the field for work, I go to die." People find new ways to survive. Drying tree bark and making flour. Grinding stones and mixing its powder to make bread so that the bread is thick. Boiling old leather and eating it. Some say, if your shoes are torn, you can't eat them first. Once in a village, people burned donkey bones and made soup. It tasted terrible, but taste is not a big deal to hunger. During this time, rumors spread all around. Some say that witches across the river swallow grain at night. Some say that the lords have hidden grain in the warehouse and are killing people on purpose. Still others say that people in distant kingdoms have started eating corpses. In this fear, the farmers wonder, will we still be human tomorrow, or will we become animals? At least one person dies in the village every day, hunger, disease, or weakness. In the past, when someone died, they were buried with ceremonies. But now, death is so common that no one has the strength to dig a grave. The body is sometimes buried behind the house, sometimes left in the forest. Children are afraid at first, then they get used to it. They say, "He is not hungry anymore." Soon go to break into the world at night, and if caught, their hands are cut off. Women go to the city to beg. Some sell their bodies to survive. People's morals collapse. Religion, shame, honor, everything is lost in a hungry stomach. Yet at times, people smile. When someone brings a little grain from the market, the whole family shares it and eats it. There is joy around the small piece of bread. as if it were a feast for kings. But this smile is short-lived, because everyone knows that hunger will come again tomorrow. Thus, the second chapter of the famine continues. Every morning brings new fears, new disappointments, and new struggles. Hunger is not just a stomachache, it is a slow-moving battle. The battle is within people dignity versus hunger, love versus survival. When a family goes without food for a long time, the first thing that breaks down is from within. You look at your wife, anger in her eyes, because she thinks you may have secretly stored food. You think she may have eaten the last loaf of bread left for the children herself. In a hungry family, love quickly turns to suspicion. A mother looks at her child's plate and thinks, if I give her one less bite, I will survive. The children think, maybe Dad has secretly hidden something from the market.
Brothers and sisters fight in this.
It turns out that he is secretly cooking something. Immediately, everyone broke the door and stole the pot. Do you know what was inside the pot? Rotten cabbage and a handful of wild grass. Nevertheless, the people took the broth and ate it, and the one who cooked it stood and cried.
At that time, all that is in the air.
The farmer was secretly returning from the market with a handful of grain. On the way, his neighbor saw him. At first he begged, "Brother, give me some." But the farmer did not agree. Then the neighbor hit him with a stone, took the grain, and ran away. The farmer lay on the ground, covered in blood and mud. This is not just a story of one incident. Such incidents began to happen every day. Friendship, brotherhood, trust in neighbors. Everything was destroyed because of hunger. When people no longer had any food, they began to do things that were previously unthinkable. Eating old skins boiled, grinding horse bones into powder and making soup, eating cats, dogs, crows, and even the flesh of dead animals. In some places, the situation was so terrible that people started spreading rumors that people were eating people. Although everyone said, no, we will not stoop that low. No one knew what was going on secretly. The church still wanted to convince people this is God's test. Be patient. But hungry people could not fill their stomachs with patience. Many people went to church and begged for alms, but the priests themselves were hungry. Then they just gave blessings and said, when you go to heaven, you will get plenty of food. Some got angry and said, we want food now, not in the afterlife. Children were the worst victims of the famine. Their small bodies could not bear the hunger. One day, a mother saw her child waking up at night and whispering, Mom, I ate bread in my dream. The next morning, the child stopped breathing. Such incidents happen so often that small graves of dead children are lined up in the village. Still, surprisingly, sometimes people try to hold small celebrations even in the midst of famine. If a family gets a little extra food, they call their neighbors. Everyone sits together, shows a piece of bread. Will go away. We will be able to eat. Although it is a kind of self-deception, at that moment, people still find a reason to live. At the end of the day, the pain of hunger increases so much that many think it is better to die. An old woman in the village knelt down on her last night and prayed, "O God, take me today. Death is better than hunger." In the morning, it turned out that she was really dead. The people of the village said, "She is lucky. We are still alive, which means there is still suffering." This is the third chapter of Famine. Hunger has now entered not only the body, but also the mind. It has separated people from each other. Families have broken up. Neighbors have become enemies. The hole that famine and hunger had opened, now the stream of pain mixed with disease. People have become weak. The body's defenses have been broken. The immune system has been weakened by the empty stomach. And mosquitoes, insects, dirty water, malnutritional are signs of disease. Some morning, you will see pairs of people suddenly bending over with fever, not crying, but only sneezing and calling someone in a low voice, "Give me water." Yet that very water is making people sick. In a village, the question of when and what happened is like daily news. First comes the fever, the body melts. The color of the face goes out. The nose melts, and the stomach becomes hard. Then comes diarrhea. Water leaves the body quickly. People are unable to work in the fields. Their knees are buckling. One by one, some are going down before evening. An old woman was vomiting repeatedly. Her son realized at night that he could no longer stand up. The next morning, when I went to look for her, I saw that the old woman had stopped. Her eyes were high. Her hands were cold. Her son shouted, "Why? What did she do? Whom should I blame?" But there was no other answer, only silence and the slow, heavy breathing of a corpse. There was no one in the village who knew how to be a doctor. There were only surgeons. They shaved their beards, held razors in their hands, and confidently said, "It will be better if you bleed." Yes, the strange world of medieval medicine comes into view here. People say that the four humors blood, phlegm, yellow, and black, biliff, they become unbalanced. Disease occurs. So treatment means bleeding, something like a lecture on the feet. If mothers wanted blood, they would say, "It won't be bad if you bleed more. The curse will go away." And a religious man, a priest, stood by the patient. He slowly said, "This is God's punishment. We will pray." The difficulty with prayer is that this prayer does not fill the stomach. The priests themselves bless on an empty stomach, and their words are quickly silenced by their inability. In 3 days, the disease spreads from house to house. The number of dead bodies increases. The number of gravediggers decreases, because those who dig the graves are themselves weak. What is the system of the village then? Some leave the dead to one side in the open field. Sometimes they take them in a bunch and throw them on the edge of the forest because the village resources are limited, and the brother or son does not want to put his family at risk by digging the grave. Those who bury at night do it quickly, a sloping hole, a nameless bump, and the body covered with leaves. It is very sad, but true. When death becomes normal, the rituals are lost. Consider another incident. There was a couple. The daughter had a fever. The son was so tired that he could not stand by her. They filled the house with 2 people, and 10 neighbors came on foot to pray for the daughter. But why couldn't her husband help in the end? Because he had already stolen and taken food for his children, and now he makes anyone who doesn't listen to prayers cry. There's still words. People's outlook has changed. Now they are thinking about cold tactics, survival or not, instead of faith and trust. Accusations of witches spread quickly. When poverty and disease go hand in hand, people try to find alternatives, someone to blame. The old woman, who was not used to feeding strange animals, sits in her chair and speaks in a different tone. That woman set fire to our crops last night. Because finding some kind of culprit brings peace to people's minds. Maybe, they say, if it was someone's fault, we would have peace if we had cut it off. The church also sometimes uses these stories. Priests speak openly about witches. If you give up your sins, God will have mercy. And if you do not advise that woman, we have no more responsibility. As a result, a strange drama begins in the village. An old woman who, in good times, sold a little cheese, suddenly becomes suspected. People close the door to her house. Some take sharp rocks like madmen and often torture the witch. The beatings continue until she dies. Death at this time is not only a physical end, it is also a social end. If people do not bury the deceased, then shame and immense regret remain for the family. The psychological damage to the survivors increases every day when their eyes lower to the ground. It seems that the darkness is getting darker. The joy that was in the village is erased. Children cannot play. Their games are ended by the work of digging graves. Parents look at them in fear. They know that if the children grow up, the responsibility of survival will fall on their shoulders. This is a terrible thought. At the same time, the behavior of the lords also changes. The lords are often protected in their own courts. They have food reserves, although some lords do suffer from hunger. Some show kindness to the local people, opening their warehouses and giving out some rice, distributing it. But these little help is not extensive. The humanity of the lords is also limited. And if the lords are hiding grain, the demands for taxes from above do not stop. The demands of the taxpayers increase. Rural rebellions often flare up over this. Some villages break into warehouses at night, although many times they are caught, and the results are terrible. Amputation of hands, fines, even death. A strange kind of violence sometimes appears in the midst of famine. People do things with time involuntarily, as if they do not hear themselves. A young man finds his brother on his way home in the evening, in the darkness of the night. His brother tells him, "Today I bought a handful of grain at the market. If you had come at night, I would have given it to you." But the story is not true, because the market people know this kind of grain is not sold. Nevertheless, violent tensions spread. The conversation is heartrending. At night, people suspect each other, behave like enemies. One morning, such a scene is seen in the village. A long procession of corpses. They are not shoulder to shoulder. A pit full of various corpses. Some are separated from their families. Some simply stand with their heads bowed. The children's eyes are filled with inhumanity. There is no joy, only the unbearable pain of hunger and the silence of death. However, even in the midst of famine, small, pitiful smiles can be seen. An old woman takes out a piece of sugar hidden in her secret pocket and shows it to everyone, and everyone chews the sweet together. Everyone thinks that this is the small reason why tonight can be saved. These small joys are what keep the village alive, keep it mentally waiting. Eventually, this episode of disease and death changes the village. The population decreases. The land becomes empty. The bodies of the surviving people are permanently scarred. Gradually, after a few months, if there is a favorable rain or food arrives from a neighboring town, the whole village life can slowly start again. But this beginning is not always the same as before business. Family, relationships, social order, everything changes. When hunger lasts a long time, not only the stomach, but also the heart of the people is broken. The villages are like cursed islands, where laughter and joy are lost, and the nights are filled with whispers. How much longer will we last? In the midst of the famine, a strange wind began to blow through the village. It seemed that the entire village was burning under God's curse. It was not raining. The rivers were drying up, and instead of crops growing in the fields, only weeds and thorns were growing. People began to believe this was not just a natural disaster. It was God's anger. Religious fanaticism gradually set the village on fire. One group of people said, "God is testing us. The more we pray, the sooner He will save us." Another group believed, "This is the result of our sins. Someone is to blame. He must be found." A terrible trend emerged among this second group, witch hunts. When there is no food, when there is no hope of survival, people need someone to blame. The old widow of the village, who lives alone in the house, is suddenly accused. That's why the rain has stopped. She's a witch. People gathered with torches. The widow shouted, "I'm just getting through the day. Don't accuse me falsely." But the hungry crowd had no time to listen. They wanted a glimmer of hope, and if they could please God by sacrificing someone, that's what they would do. The woman was dragged out of the village in the dark of night, and in the morning only ashes remained. Yet, surprisingly, the next day a light cloud appeared in the sky. The villagers burst into joy. "Look, God is pleased." But the cloud brought no rain, only stormy wind and dust. Hunger remained as before. Only one person was left in the village. This religious frenzy took on a more terrifying form. The priests began to explain to the villagers, "Pray more, make more sacrifices. God is watching us." People donated even their little food to the church. Many left their last loaves on the church steps. Maybe this way God will have mercy on us. But in reality, it turned out that the priests shared the food among themselves. The children then just kept crying in their mother's laps. They did not understand whom God would save, whom He would punish. They only understood that there was nothing in their stomachs. Many children quietly lay down next to their mothers at night and did not wake up in the morning. The mothers then cried and cried, but her tears had dried up long ago. At one time, the villagers felt that they might never be able to get out of this famine, but still, small hopes still remained. Some would say, "I heard that there is still food in the distant city." Another would say, "Maybe the king will send grain." That hope did not let the people die completely. Sometimes, after evening, everyone would gather in the middle of the village, hungry, emaciated people. Fire. An old man would tell a story. Many years ago, there was such a famine. We were still alive though. We will survive this time too. People would find some peace in his words. Hunger would not subside, but at least for a few moments, they would feel we are still alive, meaning it is not over yet. But as the night deepened, the sound of dogs howling, the sound of dry leaves in the air, and the pitiful sighs of people would fill the air. Then it would be understood This famine was not only a test of the body, it was also a test of the soul. Just as hunger was killing people, disease came with the famine. Malnourished bodies and a dirty environment combined to turn villages into living cemeteries. The river water had dried up, and the little water that was left was filled with dung, bones of dead animals, and rotten moss. Still, people tried to survive by drinking that water. Water would enter the stomach, then fever, chills, and diarrhea would begin. Children were the first to be affected. Their bodies would wither in a day. Their eyes would become sunken like holes. Many times, a mother would hold her child in her arms and wonder, is he sleeping or is he gone forever? Then, when she realized the truth, she would be so exhausted in the morning, they would find their neighbor's hut empty. At night, the entire family had died. Someone had no one buried them, no one prayed. The hungry people would just whisper, "One family less," which means the food ration will also be less. The horror of the disease began to pierce not only the body, but also the mind. Some thought that this disease was actually a curse from the devil. They would dance in the dark of the night with torches in their hands, trying to drive away the devil. Others thought that maybe this was God's way to wipe out the weak and sinful people. The church was still continuing its story. The priests would say, "Be patient, pray, God will end this suffering one day." But the villagers no longer wanted to hear the name of God. They would say, "If God loves us so much, why did he let our children die like this?" At one point, the situation in the village was such that people no longer had the strength to bury the body. When someone died, they would leave it next to the house. The smell of rotting meat would waft through the air. Dogs would run and bite the body. Crows would peck at it. No one would stop them. Everyone was so weak that they would just turn a blind eye. Some families made terrible decisions to survive. They left the village. They thought that maybe they would go to a distant city and find food. But on the way, they realized that the famine was not only in their village, but everywhere. When they saw countless hungry beggars lying on the streets, people who looked like dry bones, they realized that this was not a problem of a single village or city, but the entire country was plunged into darkness. The situation of those who remained was even more terrible. People with diseases would suddenly collapse on the streets. No one would help, because if they touched them, the disease might spread. People became so suspicious of people that even friends would avoid each other. When hunger reached its peak, people no longer hid. They openly declared, "I will survive, no matter what." If someone had a little grain hidden, there would be quarrels, fights, and sometimes even murder. Even if a person cut the throat of his brother for a piece of bread, it was not considered unusual at that time. On the other hand, some people became almost like animals. They would go to the fields and chew raw grass, eat tree bark. Some would cut the bones of dead animals, burn them in a fire, grind them into powder, and drink them like soup. At one point, rumors spread that in some places, people had even started eating humans. Although everyone denied it out loud, everyone was still afraid inside. My neighbor next door might eat me one day. This terrible situation continued day after day. Every day was death. Every day was mourning. Yet, surprisingly, some people still fought on. They would say, as long as there is breath, there is hope. They would look for wild berries, dried mushrooms, and even roots growing in the mud. But when night fell, all courage would be broken. The village would be filled with the sounds of groans, coughing, and the smell of rotting bodies. It would feel like death was not just at the doorstep, but inside the house. Famine, like an invisible giant, had been oppressing the villages for months. As dawn comes at the end of every night, one day a sign of change appeared. At first, it was very small rain fell through a gap in the dark clouds. At first, a few drops, then suddenly a heavy downpour. The parched land swallowed the water, and new life seemed to spring up in the cracked soil. People did not believe it at first. Some thought that maybe God was playing tricks on them again. But when it rained for several days in a row, the villagers realized maybe this was the long-awaited salvation. The hungry people stood on the muddy ground with their faces raised and began to swallow the rain. Some danced, some cried, and some shouted like crazy. We will survive. We are still alive. Still, rain does not mean harvest immediately. It will take months for the harvest to grow, and who can survive on an empty stomach for so long? That's when a new, terrible chapter came to the fore. Along with the rain, disease spread, leeches, insects. Those who were weakened by hunger could no longer handle this attack. Some died shivering from fever. Others froze in the cold, unable to dry their wet clothes. But those who were still alive understood that if they gave up now, it was all over. They cut down the branches of the trees and started to cultivate the land anew. They cleared the weeds, sowed seeds. Although they had no strength left in their bodies, they still pulled each other up. If anyone had a little grain left, they shared it and sowed it together, because they knew that if the crop did not grow this time, they would never be able to survive again. Over time, the land began to turn green. At first, a few shoots, then gradually the fields were filled with grain. The villagers would stand next to the fields and say with tearful eyes, "We never thought we would see this scene again." When the first harvest was brought home, it seemed more precious than gold. But even in this joy, there was deep sadness, because not everyone could return. Half the people in the village had died in that famine. The bones of those who could not even be buried were still scattered in many places. Children were lost. Families were broken. Neighbors had become enemies. The people who survived always carried a kind of guilt. Why did I survive? And why did he die? Their behavior also changed forever. They became so restless about food that even if they got a little bread, they would not eat it. They wanted to store it. Many people would wake up from sleep night after night, dreaming that the famine had returned. Children played the game of hiding food instead of playing, and the old people were afraid every rainy day. What if the land is ruined again? The priests declared, "Look, we prayed, so God saved us." But the villagers no longer had that faith. They knew that if God had been so merciful, their children would not have died like this. Many of them, even if they did not say anything, harbored resentment against the church. Nevertheless, the famine taught them a lesson. No one can survive alone. Those who worked together with their neighbors survived. Those who tried to hide food alone were either victims of theft or murder. or died of disease. The survivors often told stories. I almost died that day if so-and-so had not given me a sip of water. In this way, the terrible memory gradually turned into a kind of legend. Children would sit by the fire at night and listen to how their parents had survived the famine. They would shiver, but at the same time, they would feel proud. We have a history of survival in our blood, but this history was not glorious at all. It was a history of hunger, death, and terrible choices. Those who survived knew that sometimes humans can be more dangerous than animals, and they carried that lesson with them throughout their lives. A few years later, when the harvest was good, people celebrated again. They sang, danced, and ate bread and meat to their heart's content. Yet, amidst that joy, there was a stifling silence, because everyone still had that year of famine etched in their minds, when death knocked on every door and hunger separated people from people. An old man in the village said in his final days, "We lived that year, but a part of us died that year. Food came back, rain came, but laughter never fully returned." Thus ended the terrible story of the medieval famine. It was not just a year. It was a lesson that hunger does not just empty the stomach. It breaks people to pieces, tears apart their faith, love, and humanity. Yet some people survive, just to prove that even after the darkest night, dawn comes.